Well, hello there, everyone, and happy weekend to you. Those of you who are off for the weekend, congratulations, you made it to the end of the week. I'm happy to get to Friday, is when I'm recording this. It might not post until Saturday, but it's still a weekend, so congratulations for making it. And this is a video I know I wanted to do when I started this part of my channel back in January of this year, 2021. I know I wanted to make a video dedicated to this band. It's not a band that many people know about in terms of the mainstream. They're not a radio band, which are usually the best kind of bands if you ask me. But they're a band that I've fallen in love with for the past few years. I got into them when I was in college. Kind of distanced myself from them, not because I didn't like them, but because I just didn't delve into them like I should have and found other music. And then I got back into them a few years ago, and kind of really haven't looked back. I've seen them twice in concert, a couple of years apart. Actually, before I keep going, the name of the band, if you couldn't tell by the video title, the name of the band are the Wood Brothers, consisting of brothers Chris and Oliver Wood, Chris on bass, Oliver on guitar, as well as the third member, percussionist Jono Ricks. Multi-instrumentalist. I wouldn't just call him a percussionist, but for the sake of the, bringing them down to filtering what they each do in the band, Jono plays drums. He also plays an instrument called it's called a shitar. It's pronounced Shuitar, and it's a legitimate company. But it's a guitar that's got all sorts of percussion on it. It's got little tambourines. He's got the strings loose to make it like a snare. It's really cool. Check it out on YouTube. But actually, I was going to say is that this band was the last concert that I saw before the world completely shut down. I saw them in November of 2019 in Roanoke, Virginia, and I haven't, in terms of having that as my last concert memory for now, it's a good one. I mean, I'd seen them a few years before, and they just killed it both times. I still say that they are probably the best live band that I've ever seen, and that includes, I've seen Crosby, Stills and Nash. I'm trying to think of other bands off the top of my head that I've seen. The Avett Brothers. I've seen the Avett Brothers. They knock it out of the park. They don't stick to a set list, which is the only way, really, if you're touring constantly, to do it. The Grateful Dead made that a habit years ago, and their followers have kind of taken on a similar example. But I don't want to make this video too long. I just want to talk about my love of the Wood Brothers. They started in Georgia. Chris Wood was with a jazz trio called Medeski, Martin, and Wood, in which he played bass. Had a big following in the 90s and early 2000s with them. And his brother Oliver was with a group called King Johnson. And, they never played together. And then one day, Oliver came and sat in with Chris, and they clicked as brothers. I mean, I'm guessing as brothers, somebody with siblings, I can attest, you don't want to do what your siblings are doing, usually, especially when you're growing up. But when they finally grew up, they got together, played music, and they've been going at it since 2006 as the Wood Brothers. Their first couple of albums, they didn't have Jono on the percussion. It was the two of them and a few session guys, but it was very sparse instrumentation. To describe what they are very similar in terms of style to groups like The Band. I know I talk about The Band a lot. The Band, of course, being the band that backed Bob Dylan in the 60s and then had their own major career into the 70s, culminating in The Last Waltz, and then some reunions later on. In 2008, they kind of had their first major label release with their album Loaded. Oh, excuse me. Their first two albums were called Ways Not to Lose and Loaded. And Loaded is a really great. I don't have all their albums. I've got their first album right here, Ways Not to Lose, and this probably has their most crowd-friendly song on it called Luckiest Man. And that's kind of their big sing-along song. If you want to start with the Wood Brothers, check out Luckiest Man. There's all sorts of versions online. They're all fantastic. They've changed up the arrangement over the years. But they signed on to Zach Brown of the Zach Brown Band's label called Southern Ground. And I know Zach has sung a couple of their songs before, and they've toured together. They're not like the Zach. I mean, they're not like country. I mean, they're rock and roll. They've got some funk. They've got some jazz elements. I know Chris once said, and I'm taking a lot of these facts from their website, so you can check out their website for the full autobiography about them if I don't do a good enough job. But Chris said that they wanted their band to sound like Charles Mingus meets Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson, of course, being the blues legend that he was, starting the blues with just a handful of songs. Well, starting the modern blues, I should say. But all of their albums just continually get better. This was the first album I listened to in its entirety. It's called The Muse. This was released on Southern Ground by Zach Brown. The title track, whoops, can't get it. Well, forget that. The title track, The Muse, is a beautiful ballad about, of course, having your muse direct you in life, in your lows and your highs, up until like the birth of your child is kind of how the song ends. That's the first song I ever heard them play. It was on some late night show. I think it might have been Conan that I saw them play the song on, and I was like, man, that sounds different, but I love it. Oliver's voice is it's just a strong voice, and live, I mean, they're better live. They're kind of one of those bands where they, like the Grateful Dead, they put their music onto a record, but then can expand the record once they're on the road. The Muse, a solid album all the way through. Again, you just go through, watch the Wood Brothers. They have all sorts of little concerts and things that you can watch online, short sets. The follow-up to that was called, and I don't have all the albums, especially a couple of the early ones. I have all their later albums, but not a couple of the early ones. Paradise is another album. It's fantastic. Just funky music. It's got, Chris is a great stand-up bassist. Oliver plays a mean slide guitar, acoustic and electric. Jono can play, when you see them live, Jono's on the drum kit most of the time, but he's got a little keyboard as well, so he's playing the keys and, hitting the drums with one hand. And, then they'll do an acoustic set around one mic where he'll bring out the shitar and they'll play a couple of acoustic songs. Here's a neat little live album. It's short in terms of it's only got a few songs, less than 10 songs on it. This was called Live at the Barn, recorded at Levon Helm of the band. It was recorded at his barn where there's a lot of live music up there. He used to have a thing called the Midnight Rambles up until his passing, and then they've kind of kept that alive, his family and his estate. And actually they end this album with, I'm not even going to worry about showing it, that light's terrible. They end this CD with Ophelia by the band, and they all three take a lead vocal on the verses, and they actually did that song the first time that I saw them, and it was fantastic. I mean, it's so good. There are several versions of that. Check, again, any live footage that you find of them online, it's worth watching. Next, this was their Grammy nominated album called One Drop of Truth, and let's see if I can adjust that. One Drop of Truth. I like this album a lot. One of the second song called Happiness Jones, when they do that song live, they kind of go into a funky medley with Express Yourself, and I mean, it's just great. I mean, like 8 minutes of it, and it's just, again, just check them out live if you can. I know they're doing some drive-through shows this summer, so go on their website, woodbrothers.com, check them out. I mean, get their music. It's so good. I can't talk enough about them. Their last album, well, not their last album, but their most recent album, called Kingdom in My Mind. This was a result of them jamming in the studio. They were just jamming, and they thought, let's make an album based around these jams. And the songs themselves aren't jam-based, like they're not 12-minute long Grateful Dead style songs. I mean, they're straightforward 3-4 minute songs. But they revolve around the riffs and the grooves that they came up with in the studio. The first song, Alabaster, is fantastic. It's funky. Harmonies, all three of them can sing and harmonize with each other. Little Bit Sweet is a beautiful little ballad. I mean, again, it's hard to talk about a band, especially to somebody who doesn't know them, without playing their music. The music really speaks for itself. I'm just kind of a vessel, kind of promoting them for no income, no money, just because I love them so much. So tell me if you know about the Wood Brothers. Like I said, listen to them online. Anything that you look up, it's going to be good. Anything live, if you look up their studio stuff, it's going to be good. They don't have a bad song. If you want to start with an album all the way through, start with the Muse. Then maybe I'd recommend going into Kingdom in My Mind, their most recent album, and then maybe go back to their earlier stuff, which is more acoustic based. But if you want to start with some of the more funky, rockier kind of stuff, start with those albums, and then kind of go backward, and then fill in the gaps with the live footage and the shows and the acoustic sessions that they do, like at radio stations and festivals and things like that. But let me know if you know the Wood Brothers. If not, and I'm happy to recommend songs. If you want to, if you want to ask me for a playlist, I can put together 10 songs that you should listen to. They're a great band. Check them out. Wood Brothers. I will see y'all soon.